Okay, so today we are going to be talking about my favorite books of the season. We are now officially having a season change. Actually, not quite officially. Doesn't matter. In September, we move into spring, even though it's still hot. So I'm going to tell you what are the top 5 books that I loved this season. Honorable mention to Words of Radiance, book 2 in the Stormlight Archive. I'm currently rereading the Stormlight Archive. It should make this list, but I decided to not talk about rereads. Moving forward, these are in no particular order. I'm just going to talk about them in the order. Okay, so they are in an order. I'm just going to talk about them in the order in which I read them from furthest back to most recent. So they're not in a ranking. Okay, The Vanishing Half. So The Vanishing Half is about two black women who are white passing, and they're in a town that isn't awesome. One of them moves away and decides to live life as a white woman. She marries a white man, she has a white child, and she doesn't tell anyone about where she's from, her background. This is set in the 40s, and she has a lot of internal hatred for her past and for where she comes from. The other sister, did I mention they're twins? Her twin, she goes back to their previous hometown and lives her life there. So we follow the twins, and then we also follow their daughters, and these twins are disconnected. They haven't seen each other in years. It's a very complex story that is weaved together so well. Each of the 4 women that we follow have very unique stories and very unique struggles that they need to work through. And then eventually the 2 daughters meet and come together through that link. I don't want to say too much because it's all done in this, oh gosh, I love the way this author wrote this story. I loved how she weaved their stories together and how each storyline was so individual, so many interesting topics discussed, and I enjoyed this book so much. I loved the way the author wrote it. I loved the individual characters. Phenomenal book. Next book on the list is All Systems Red, which is a novella. It's the first in a series of novellas that leads up to a full-length novel in the Murderbot series. This follows Murderbot, and it's hilarious. There's not a lot of world building that happens. There's not a lot of depth that comes from the side characters in this first little novella. In the first novella, the focus is really on Murderbot, this robot who is very bad at its job, and just wants to watch human soap operas. It's very apathetic, very dry, sarcastic humor that is so funny to read. Such a relatable and hilarious character to follow this robot is, and I enjoyed it so much. It was the perfect, to me, these little novellas, I mean, I've only read the first one, are perfect for in between really big, heavy, epic sci-fi, fantasy, whatever. There's such a little funny yet deep and thoughtful story. There's so many quotes in this that we buddy read this over on my not Patreon Discord server, and oh man, the whole chat was just quoting things back and forth to each other as we were reading it together, and it was so much fun to read with friends. I will definitely be continuing with the series. I had so much fun reading it. Next book is Fires of Vengeance, book 2 in the Burning series. Book 1 is The Rage of Dragons. You can't see it, it's out of frame. Book 1 is The Rage of Dragons. I loved the first book in the series. I loved the second book in the series. This is an ARC copy. I've already pre-ordered the finished copy, and it was so great. So this series is about this world where 1 in every 1,000 women is able to call down dragons, and 1 in every 100 men is able to change into this fighting machine. And it's set in this incredible, interesting, unique world. And it follows Tao, who is on a revenge plot, and it's a military fantasy, so go in knowing that. There's so I loved the world. I loved the world building in this story. I was very attached to Tao, even though I don't care about revenge plots. I was very attached to him, and I was so in love with his sword brothers and all the different. Anyway, book 2 did such a great job. I feel like I've talked about this book so much recently. Did such a great job of taking all the things that Rage of Dragons did well and continuing it forward, and all the things that would have been stale if we kept going into book 2 changed those things. And it was such a great sequel. I loved it probably nearly as much as the first book, which usually book 2 in a series unless you're Sanderson, book 2 tends to be my least favorite in the series, and I enjoyed this probably nearly as much as I enjoyed book 1. So I loved it. Next book on the list is Timeline by Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton is quickly becoming one of my top authors. I want to read through everything he writes. Timeline follows a group of students who are history majors, and their professor turns up in another timeline, and they get a note from him, and they need to go back to where he is to try to rescue him, and incidents ensue. It's a great combination of... One thing that Michael Crichton does really, really well is environmental starts. Like, he has a very slow build to his books, and he will build up an atmosphere. He'll build up a setting to the point that I feel like I'm there with the characters, so that when things start escalating, I think it's happening to me too, because I'm so immersed. He also does an amazing job of making his books so technical and really breaking down, like in this one we're talking about time travel of sorts, and in this book he did such a great job of breaking it down in a way that I didn't just feel like I was reading a fun story about time travel, which time travel can really be a miss for me a lot of times, because I don't want time travel to just be a thing that exists in the world and you just have to accept it. I tend to like more of a hard magic system or a hard sci-fi where things are really being broken down and explained. And Crichton does such a great job of not info dumping. It never feels like an info dump, and yet delivering so much information that I feel like I'm not just reading a story, but like I'm actually discussing a theory with someone who believes in the theory. He does such a great job of bringing it down to the point where I can run with it, and I'm not hung up by a bunch of details, and also delivering such an action-packed, fun, exciting story. I went into this looking for a time travel epic, and it was more of a romp, but not in a negative way. I don't mean that in a negative way. It was just fun. There's nothing wrong with a romp. It was a fun, exciting story, and I thought it was going to be more epic in scope, and it was much more narrow. But once I adjusted my expectations, I still had such a fun time reading it. And it was so well executed. I just had a great time with this book. And I want to read more of his books. I have at least 3 more of his books. What's the one that everybody keeps telling me to read? I don't see it on my shelves. Anyway, I loved this book. I think that it is a great book for anybody that is especially wanting to dip your toes into hard sci-fi. This is such a great place for that, because it is more complex. It is a slower start, but it's also just a thrilling, fun ride once things get going. And I think that it's a great combination of what someone would be looking for if they were trying to transition into something a little bit harder. It was a great story, and I loved it. The last book on my list is The Sleeper and the Spindle by Neil Gaiman. Gaiman is easily one of my favorite authors. He's such an environmental author. I always feel so immersed in everything about his story, and he does such a great job of very slow builds and very spooky vibes, and then always delivering on this story that I just feel like I never know. I always think I know where his story is going. I always think I know what's coming, and I never write with him, but by the time I get to the end, I always think, this is where it always had to go. This is the perfect place that it needed to end up. This is exactly what I wanted out of this, but I thought I wanted something else, but this is what it needed to be. I'm always just so captured by his writing and his execution and his what he create. I love. Okay, so anyway, it follows Snow White, and then our guest star is Aurora, Sleeping Beauty. But neither of these princesses are anything like you think they are. They're very unique to this story. So Snow White this is after the fairy tale that we know, and she's getting ready for her wedding, and then she gets a word that this neighboring kingdom has all gone into this deep, deep sleep because the princess in the tower has gone into a sleep, and so the whole kingdom goes into the sleep. You know the story. So we follow Snow White and 3 of her dwarves who go on a journey to find her and attempt to wake this sleeping kingdom. And that's all I'm going to tell you. I'm just going to give you the setup because it is very, very short. It's only 66 pages and it's illustrated. So sometimes, let me get a non-spoiler. So sometimes you get full illustrations with just a few words. Sometimes you get more words than that, but it's short. I do recommend, if it's possible, if it's accessible, if it's something that you can do, I do recommend physically reading it. The illustrations add so much to the story. So if you're capable of getting the illustrations too, highly recommend. I loved this book so much. I won't tell you anything more about it because it's so short, but Gaiman is an author that always gives me what I don't think I want, but is always perfect. And I found this story so empowering and good. Really, really good. So these are my top 5 books of the season. We have some sci-fi, some fantasy, some literary fiction. Hopefully that there is a book in this stack that interests you. I would love to chat with you more. Are there any books in here that you've read? How did you feel about them? Do you plan to pick any of them up? And what were your top 5 books of the season? Be sure to chat with me more in the comments. I post videos every Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.